First of all, I believe that whatever you do with regard to earmarks has to be transparent. If you're going to ask for something back for your state or a particular community, you post it on the internet, you be proud and don't hide it. For years, what people have done is they've slipped those into the middle of the night, and sometimes months later, sometimes years later, you find out. But will I support earmarks under certain circumstances? You bet I will. I'll tell you what I'll do. If it means to get a runway at Plumbrook, if it means that we're going to help the flats, if it means that we're going to create and build businesses, if it means we're going to have an opportunity corridor, if it means that we're going to be able to leverage private dollars and create short-term jobs and long-term jobs, you better believe I will. But I won't be doing it to create a pet project that maybe somebody wants because they helped me or somebody else. I'll do it because I'm running for the U.S. Senate to save jobs, create jobs, and attract jobs, and it's the rising tide that lifts all votes. I want to go to wind turbines from steel. I want to go to glass from solar panels. I want to go from those gas-guzzling cars to the hybrid vehicles and electric plug-in vehicles. I want to go from the tires in Akron to advanced materials that make things lighter and stronger. And one way to do that is to use the resources of the federal government to do things that actually not just create jobs Tuesday, but create industries on down the road. That's what I've learned day to day, not touring factories, but as somebody who's negotiated deal after deal after deal to keep companies here and to attract them here. And yes, I'll support those kinds of earmarks.
Mr. Portman, 1 minute for response.
Well, earmarks have gotten out of control. There's no question about it. And when I was OMB director for a year, as you know, I put all earmarks online. This didn't make me very popular with my former colleagues, Republican or Democrat alike. But guess what? Sunlight is a really good disinfectant. And earmarks had increased about 4 times in the previous 10 years. Once they were all online, everybody could see what they were, where they were going, who had asked for them. The number of earmarks declined substantially. I think earmarks have to go through a merit-based competitive process. Look, we have the largest deficit in the history of our country. We're looking at, under this administration, doubling the debt in 5 years, tripling it in 10 years. We've got to put some fiscal restraints in place. If we don't do that, we're not going to have the same country for our kids and our grandkids. It's that serious. Earlier, the last question, Lieutenant Governor Fisher talked about raising taxes again. This is not the answer. He talked earlier about how he wants to raise taxes on companies that are doing business here in Ohio, that are creating jobs here in Ohio,
Mr. Portman?
that are doing work overseas. He talked a minute ago how he wants to raise taxes on small businesses in Ohio. It's not the right way to go.
Bill Hershey has the next question. It is to Mr. Portman for a 2-minute answer.
Mr. Portman, would you have supported the rescue of General Motors and Chrysler that was begun under President Bush and continued under President Obama? And if not, how would you have explained your opposition to the thousands of Ohioans who depend on those companies and their suppliers to earn a living?
Yeah, the auto industry is absolutely critical to Ohio, and I'm delighted to see the auto industry starting to come back. And yes, at the time I said I would have supported it. I would have liked to see more conditions, Bill, because unfortunately, as you all know, $50 billion of our taxpayer money went to a private entity that the government essentially took over, and then they closed 4 plants here in Ohio. So if I had been in office at the time, I would have supported it, but I would have been sure that Ohio didn't fall behind. And again, I'm glad you see some progress now at General Motors and at Chrysler. But I think a lot of Ohioans who lost their jobs after there was a decision not to let them go into bankruptcy, but instead to have the federal government step in with our tax dollars to support them, saw their jobs get lost here in the great state of Ohio. The ultimate answer, though, here is not more government bailouts. And Lieutenant Governor Fisher just talked about how he supports this program where money comes, what he said, for small businesses. It doesn't go to small businesses for loans. It's the government buying the stock of banks. It's a mini TARP program, and that's why I opposed it. Even the new head of the consumer agency for the Obama administration said she doesn't like it, doesn't think it's going to work, because guess what? The first bailout program for TARP, you remember that one that went to the banks? Didn't work because it didn't increase lending for small businesses. That ought to be the goal. That's why instead I supported having the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration, provide a bigger guarantee to banks for the banks to loan using the private sector model. That works a lot better. We shouldn't be shareholders of banks as taxpayers. The government cannot run a bank. The government cannot run companies as well as the private sector. So the ultimate solution here is to get back to, again, what's made our economy here in Ohio not just a leader, but a leader in the Industrial Revolution. We were the spearhead of the Industrial Revolution, a state that was looked to as a leader. We can be that state again, but it's going to require the government being a better partner with business and helping business, not providing more and more bailouts.
Mr. Fisher, 1 minute for response.
You would never know it from that answer that Congressman Portman supported the bailout of the Wall Street banks. And there is a big difference between a bailout of banks with no requirement to small businesses that they receive loans from those banks and a rescue. This was a rescue that was absolutely necessary. Unlike Congressman Portman, I've been to every auto plant in this state. I've traveled to Detroit 4 times a year with the governor to meet with the executives of Chrysler and Ford to make sure they make as many investments as possible. The governor and I were at Lordstown the other day. When we first came into office, 1 shift. Today, 3 shifts and a new product called the Chevy Cruze. And parts from that Chevy Cruze are being made in Ford, Brook Park, Defiance, Toledo. The bottom line is if we had not rescued those, it's not just the 70,000 men and women who've lost their jobs. It would have been the suppliers and literally hundreds of thousands of people. It was a smart thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and I was proud to support it.
Now we go to Steve Hoffman with a question for Mr. Fisher and a 2-minute answer.
Mr. Fisher, the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, among others, has concluded that the overwhelming reason for a loss of manufacturing jobs in Ohio is automation, not foreign trade or jobs moving to other states. Ohio has seen a steady loss of manufacturing jobs under both Republican and Democratic administrations. How do you think Ohio should cope with this long-term trend? And are we somehow to reject efficiencies in manufacturing to maintain employment?
Steve, as the director of the Department of Development and as the chair of the Ohio Third Frontier Commission, we focused on exactly that. We focused on innovation, advanced technology, bringing cutting-edge technology to manufacturing. There are too many people who want to turn their back on manufacturing. Manufacturing is the greatest strength we have in this state, but it has to be advanced technological. We have created and capitalized more than 500 early-stage companies, innovative companies, medical device companies, medical imaging companies, solar companies, wind companies, all because we're using a competitive model where for every $1 public dollar, we attract 9 private dollars. We may never be able to compete with China on their cost, but we will always beat China and everyone else in the world on our innovation, our entrepreneurship, our creativity, and that begins with a healthy pregnant mother and a nurtured child, a phenomenal school system that goes from literally the first year of life all the way to the end of life. The single thing that I think is the most important in economic development today is workforce development. A skilled workforce geared to the short-term and the long-term needs of a business. If those students have been well-educated and well-trained when they graduate from school, their innovation will keep jobs here in America and help them grow. And again, the good news is I don't have to tour the factories. I've negotiated the deals, I've chaired the commission, and I'm proud of the fact that I'd like to take that kind of experience on the ground, saving and creating jobs based upon innovation, and take it to Washington, D.C.
Mr. Portman, 1 minute for response.